Hey guys, welcome back to Seller Sessions versus Auctioneers.com with Steve in the chair here, my co-host for the day. And today I'll be interviewing here. We're going to do a 10-step process to branding, take it from inception to exit. Steve's got a lot of experience. He's, I don't know how many trillions and billions and God knows the amount of money that you've generated over the years in terms across all your business. But I know you know how to execute. So today's going to be a bit of a special show where we're going to go through these steps. But before that, do you want to just quickly give everyone a little bit of intro and a background on yourself, and then we'll get started?
Yeah. Hey, everybody. Steve Simonson here, and I'm thrilled to have the Awesomers podcast joining Seller Sessions here yet again. By the way, this will be episode number 184. And so awesomers.com/184 will be where you get the show notes. Now, Danny, is as far as I can tell, you've done 184 episodes in the last 3 days. Your pace.
Well, we're on 38. I think it's day 38 in a row of lockdown. So we've got there so far. But I've done a lot of recording. We've got a launch on Monday for something. But by the end of this week, we'd have done 7 lives and 36 recordings for something else that are going to be announcing on Monday. So it's been a crazy week. We've got a load of post-production to do over the weekend. But like you've got to a stage where you were doing a huge amount of recording, right? I've lost count the amount of episodes now. I don't know. You're very good at numbering your episodes. I think we've smashed past the 400 ceiling. I've stopped counting now and just got on with it. Do you know what I mean? But
I totally do. Yeah. My laziness is I number them just so I can have a website address, right? Otherwise I have no rationale to the naming. But, I want to just share with everybody that, both Danny and I have a lot of experience kind of building products and brands and concepts, not just in sales on Amazon, by the way. And, if you're measuring in Zimbabwe dollars, I've done a lot of volume. But, the reality is what it takes to make a brand, what a brand vision is sometimes misconstrued. We hear things or we watch the YouTubes and people start talking about brands and they come from the Procter and Gamble and they come from these multi-billion-dollar, global conglomerate perspective. But I don't have the luxury to come from that. We have an idea and it often doesn't start at the brand level. It might start at the product level. And now we have to build and rationalize why that is something special, differentiated, and then ultimately, why would people buy it? And then, meaning the product or the brand concept. And then ultimately, does that create wealth and equity? Can we sell that company at some point? And that's the journey I want to talk through today.
Yeah. So should we kick things off with the ideation process? Yeah. I mean, there's sometimes they can start in different places, but where does it normally start for you generally? You've done multiple builds of brands, right? So you must have maybe more of a system now where it was a bit looser back in the day. Yeah.
Totally right. And I would say it's not necessarily sequential, as you just said. Although we may start from the concept of, we want a brand and a brand name and the brand value is defined. It may start from here's a problem and it needs to be solved, right? Yeah. For whatever your target customer. So that's most often where I find myself. And by the way, we're in the process, some partnerships and we are developing new brands and we've defined a problem and then we've prescribed our own kind of unique and differentiated solution. And then we kind of have to work both ends against from the middle to up towards the brand vision and then down towards the brand exit. And so my suggestion is that most Amazon sellers, as a practical example, are starting with a product idea, and that product idea is to solve a problem.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, you may agree with me on this, Danny, or not, but a lot of the Amazon sellers don't start trying to solve a problem. They start by trying to knock off something else that's selling really well. Right?
Yeah, it's like it's like your learning process, isn't it? It's like, how do I get into this? Okay, so let's take a product and make it better. Let's get good at that. Once we get good at that, maybe we can start to think about having the experience of developing a product, creating molds, and then from there it's going to be patents and it just goes on and on from there. But we all know, and I'm sure you've probably got the same thing. Like I always say, my first product was terrible, but it was the greatest thing on earth when I first done it. But, as you get through, you get better. It's like you fail your way to success.
It completely is. And I don't know any other way to do it. And I can say unequivocally that your willingness, an entrepreneur's willingness to just plunge in, make some decisions, and start that learning process is ultimately what will define whether you kind of hit it big or just kind of plan forever and never launch. And that's a terrible thing. So I far prefer people make that launch, commit to their own education, including the failure of that first product or the second iteration. And failure, you can put in quotes, right? It doesn't mean it's unlikely you're going to have some product and you launch and 3 weeks later, some giant company says we'll give you $1 billion, right? It's most likely you're going to just learn, and it's hard. You have to learn all these things kind of the hard way.
Yeah, and generally, and sometimes you learn through the struggle, and sometimes at the time it doesn't feel like you're learning. You feel like you're being beaten up, don't you? And you got to drink from the man up cup. But then you look back in 6 months' time, and it's the greatest gift sometimes that you are learning from that. And I think sometimes, as warped as it may sound, I think people remember learning process if they've experienced pain, for instance. Because you don't want to feel that way again. So subconsciously it's there. So this is why I think, same with entrepreneurship about bouncing back. Once you hit something where, you've had a real rocky road, they always say setbacks make way for comebacks. And I think they can be some of your greatest learning moments. Because give me a person who's never failed. I'll give you someone that has never learned or experienced life. I'd rather hear from someone who's had a load of bounce backs, so that they've been through the grind, that they understand it. And I think they're more set up for the future. It's like COVID-19. Me and you are well prepared for this now because we've been to war, we've done battles, we've had all those things. Whereas if you're a first-time entrepreneur, quite young, it's not your fault you haven't experienced the level of failure or something, but you might struggle in these times compared to someone else who's had to add their, everyone has a story, don't they? So
that's quite right. And, your analogy of, it's almost like the kid who touches the stove. Until you know the consequences, you don't know what to avoid, right? But you get really smart really fast in the face of obstacles and pain. So if you start in the middle and say, I'm going to find a product, and ultimately that product should solve a problem for somebody, then you can work your way up towards the brand vision and really try to understand why we're doing that. And so I'm going to jump up there here in a minute. And once you kind of understand the top part of that, then you move to the bottom, which is positioning, scaling, and then selling that brand. So, starting wherever you want in the process, but typically you got to have value in the world. And that means solving somebody's problems and doing it in a way that ultimately, not the first launch, maybe not even the second or third or fifth launch, but you're on a path to differentiation. You're on a path to something that makes you special, because just another avocado slicer is not going to change the world, honestly. But maybe the avocado slicer that's got, all these fancy gizmos and, some sort of automation, you can, get rid of the pits on 1 million avocados an hour, whatever it is, you can find a way to differentiate in your product. I'm just saying, don't expect to hit it big on the first go.
Yeah. So that's a nice segue to brand vision and the mission itself. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. So once we've identified why we're doing this, right? And it's not just the concept of I'm doing this because I need to make money and, put food on the table and petrol in the car. We have to then say that, this serves my life. This brand is here to add value to my life, both intellectually and economically and so forth. But I really encourage people to define also what they want out of this as they get going. You may not know your first day, but as early as is feasible, think of your exit. If I could sell this for $100,000 in 2 years, I would be happy. Or if I could sell this for $1 million in 5 years, I would be happy. Just set some reasonable number. It doesn't even matter what the number is, so that you can then measure your progress. And so you understand that you're doing this for your own personal why. A company, a brand, is a tool to serve your economic and life goals, not the other way around. Just too many of us have enslaved ourselves to a business thinking that we serve the business, but no, the business serves us.
No, great.
So that's kind of, once you have that ideation and rationalization, then you kind of have to move into your vision and your core values, what really makes your company tick.
Can I make just an insert here? Is that what sometimes Do you also believe as well, some things can't be forced, right? So you can't sit down and go, right, we're going to have a go on the mission of here, because inspiration don't always hit. You know, it's like timing. You get into things, it becomes the right time, you get the right vibe. In business, you take your chances. Like they say about being an entrepreneur, you only need to get it right once. Yeah. And then we'll have a lot of misfires. But sometimes some people don't always have the purpose and the meaning that comes to them. Like I can't wake up tomorrow and go, I'm going to do this off the top of my head and it's going to give me meaning and purpose. I think meaning and purpose comes alongside with the timing, and then you can put it together. So sometimes some of these things, you can't force them along. They'll come along on their own timeline.
That's quite right. And I've faced that challenge more than one time where somebody's like, hey, you've got to figure out what the vision, mission, values are. And I'm like, I'm trying to sell stuff. I need to survive. You know, it's very common for entrepreneurs not to want to get burdened with these things that appear to be administrative. Yeah. But once you start knowing that you're on the lookout for these types of things, and I'll tell you, it actually becomes much more beneficial to you once you establish, for example, core values. Like I don't believe in those stupid mission statements you see written on these big multinational companies. You know, we intend to do our best customer service and in a long term, blah, blah, blah. It's all platitudes. It's meaningless and it's absolute crap. Nobody in the company knows it. They certainly don't live by it, right? It's a so-called mission, but they don't live by it. So Roy Williams, the brilliant brander who's responsible for many, many advertising and branding campaigns over time, multi-billions of dollars, he talks about the idea of forget about writing a stupid, innocuous mission statement. Write down what you believe, right? And I'll tell you, when you start saying, well, I believe this, or we believe this as a company, it really starts to differentiate you as a company. And people buy from people they like, and they buy from humans that they have common values with. And if you like, I've got some we believes that from one of the companies.
Yeah, do you want to put them up on the screen? You can share.
Yeah,
or you can put them on the screen.
Let me find the.
While you're finding that, there was something I wanted to say. I've never really worked in corporate life, but I think like what you said there, like the mission statement stuff, to me is a bit of nonsense. I think when you work in these big companies, there are people out there on 100, 200 grand a year, but they couldn't run a bath, let alone a business. And I don't mean that in a disrespectful way, but they're good at corporate espionage and they're good at like working the system and going to meetings and stuff like that, but they're not necessarily good at creating things and getting done. So you can have like a real good corporate hawk that works there and embellish and embody all this stuff. But for me, a lot of that stuff, like you said, is meaningless unless you've got the end product and have the feeling for it. Let me get your slides up for you here. Here we go. I'll put you in there as well. Hold on. There we go.
Yeah. So first of all, I want to just heartily agree with you that when you hear me talk about vision, mission, values, don't think that I'm talking about the same corporate doublespeak that those political hacks in these companies. And really, I do kind of mean disrespect. I don't understand it. I can't do it. They're carrying on with their lives, right? They're running these giant companies like Unilever and Procter & Gamble, and they're fine. Nobody at Coca-Cola's branding department who, they will spend $50 million writing a new, tagline or making a new logo. Yeah. But like, who am I to judge? They're very successful. They have their own thing. All I say is from an entrepreneurial perspective, what do I believe, right? And this is one of our companies. And I say, we believe in fun, right? We believe in winning. We believe in the golden rule, right? Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. We believe life is a team sport. We believe in long-term relationships, right? And the more that people kind of run through these things, they start to go, well, I kind of believe that too. And they start to identify with you on a human level, on a brand level. And pretty soon they realize, gosh, if you believe that entrepreneurs are making the world a better place, then maybe that's a fit for me, right? And if you believe that, entrepreneurs add to the world, not subtract from it by being successful and creating wealth, this is something that we share. And those shared values, that's the true vision and mission. That's how you articulate these things. Core values actually mean a lot to your customers, but they mean even more to your team. When you hire people and you put these sorts of things in front of them, that is a key litmus test. If if they don't believe in fun, right? I've had experiences with people and they're just too straight buttoned down for me. We like to make jokes. We like to have fun. And in the face of adversity, a little bit of humor goes a long way, right? It really does.
No,
so I recommend people forget the platitudes and the nonsense mission statements you see on the wall that get dusty and that nobody cares about and that nobody lives by, and start to double down on what you believe and share that with the world.
Yeah, makes sense. I'm going to say some hellos to everyone in the feed, if that's okay. So Elgin says, hi, gents. Cy B says, good afternoon, peeps. Donkey years in the game and still learning by my mistakes every freaking day. Tiff's back. Good morning, guys. Deepak has asked, do you put your website or social media link on your Amazon product packaging? That is a yes, but we'll get into that a bit later. Hello from Grimsby. H. Hissing is from Tamworth here. Joanna is saying hello. Pat says, hi, gents. Selva is back from Singapore. And then we got fire emojis from Andrew in the feed. Michael's here. Herb's here. Cindy's here. Joe is here. Sophia's here as well. Hello, everyone, and welcome if you have just joined us from the different Facebook groups across, of course, Facebook. So, Herb's here we go. Hello, I started with customer brand, then the product.
Yeah, good, right? Knowing your target audience, understanding. And by the way, the worst answer you can give as a brand is, I want to sell to everybody. That ain't going to work. You need to find exactly the smallest kind of niche you can find. Now, it shouldn't be like 12 people, but it should be so specific that you really can speak to that audience in a very unique way, the way that they speak, their own nomenclature. Starting with the customer and the concept is a very fine way to start. And I want to be clear. Danny's already said this. I've said it a couple times. Where, even though there's 10 steps, where you begin is irrelevant. This does not have to be sequential. This is not a step-by-step color in the lines or what have you. This is a build it and then make sure that you evolve up and down as necessary.
Yeah, I mean, it's the obvious stuff. What happens now, if you start a new brand on Amazon, the first thing you go on the checklist, we're going to need a trademark. Yes, let's get that done because we want brand registry. That's obvious, yeah? And then you want to go, okay, we want a accrual accounting rather than cash accounting. Why? Because you want to sell but they're not necessarily like steps. They're just check boxes after a while that you learn that you want to put them in some sort of order when you're developing. But like you said, Steve, what matters is getting going, having the idea, having the meaning, having the purpose, solving a problem, etc.
Yeah, and without all of that kind of corporate doublespeak and nonsense weighing you down, right? One of our next topics really is how do you then, once you kind of have your general why you're doing this and how you expect to get out, and that you have kind of your we believes and your core values defined, then you can start to create a logo and a tagline. But I cannot tell you how many people I've seen who kind of either start with a logo and a tagline as if that's the defining characteristic of a successful company, or they spend weeks or months worried about it. I've just spun up a few different brands, some different companies that have the potential to be quite large very, very quickly. And I literally spent $30 having a logo made. The first 2 submissions just came in and went straight into the logo repository. We don't care. It's like, that's fine. If we change it later, who cares? It's just not that big a deal. Don't let that slow you down. You need something for identification. You need something to start to rally around, but don't let these details become your focus. They're not that important early on, and you can change it later. Every company I've had, including ones that were already past 50 million in sales, inevitably, there's some reason somebody rationalized we need to change it, and you go through a whole different process at that time. Don't let it slow you down early on. Yeah,
makes sense. Brand story?
Yeah, so this is a missed opportunity. I don't see very many people doing this in the Amazon space in particular, and e-commerce entrepreneurs in general. I want you guys to tell the story. And so many people tell me their story, and I hear it, and I'm like, wow, that is amazing. I love that. You should tell your customers that story. And they're like, well, no, it's not, I don't really see the attraction to it. But the story of how you started or why you started, right? It can be the truth. It doesn't have to be made up. It doesn't have to be a fantasy. And you've heard all kinds of stories about people saying, well, I started and, I bought this razor company because I really enjoyed the product and, so I became not just a customer, but I bought the company. That's fine. It's a good story, but everybody has a story of why they started, how they started, and people actually want to hear it. And by the way, for the awesomers who are on the mailing list, we send you a free SOP, how to write your company story. It will take you a couple hours. You can't force it, but we do it in a very fun and humorous way. And I essentially say, imagine that you are with, that your idol, your business idol, whether it's Gary Vaynerchuk or Tony Robbins or Elon Musk or, one of those icons, whoever they may be. And if that's not your icons, pick your own icon. But you happen to end up sharing a taxi with them somewhere, and you've got about 5 minutes to tell them your company story, how you started and what motivated you and some of the obstacles you overcame in that very short time. That's the story you need to bring up. It's interesting, even though you don't think it's interesting.
Yeah, that makes sense. So going more into brand story, do you think there confusion starts to take place where some people kind of try and develop something that's not there to make it interesting? How would you approach authenticity of a brand story? Because some people are like, oh, okay, I've got my, if we take it into an Amazon side of things, let's just say they sell screws, not very sexy, functional, replenishable product. People need them, but how do you build a story out of that that's magnificent? And are people going to be interested in that? So I think the question I'm asking you is that you can still build something that's functional and people will need, but you can't always force the brand story because you lose authenticity.
Well, I agree with that entirely. And let me just take it further to say the story is not the screws. The story is you and why you started the company, right? Yeah. So I'll just take a real life case of that, and I'm going to apply it to your screw example. Yeah. I know somebody, they said, hey, I want to put my kid in private school. My kid's struggling with these various reasons in the public school. I need to put them in private school. I need $1,000 a month to put them in private school. How can I get the $1,000 a month? I'm working a full-time job. We're struggling, but we're middle class, but it ain't easy, and we're struggling. But I got to find a way to make $1,000 a month. So I said, how can I make $1,000 a month? And I came into this Amazon world, and I said, maybe this just might have possibility. And I picked a product that I thought I could understand, I thought I could execute on, and then that it's got a little momentum and a little bit more and a little bit more, and now we have a company that we've built and we're in this business and we love this business, and here's why. And our story is that I was solving my child's education, and it birthed this company, this concept. And now the concept is taking a life of its own. That's a company story. And by the way, that's a true story.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's what I mean, but that's not been forced. That's true. Like
that's authentic. It has to be authentic.
Yeah. So what I'm saying is that some people go, well, we've got to come up with something because we've got all of these blocks to fill on our enhanced brand content.
Don't fake it.
Yeah, exactly.
And by the way, there's also a lot of people think their story is not interesting, or maybe they're even embarrassed a little bit, right? Maybe that story is like, well, I don't want to admit I don't have $1,000 to spend on my kid, but it's that vulnerability. It's that willingness to be open that is what actually makes the connection with people. Because other people, your customers, will go, you know what? I have problems like that. I identify with this story. That's the connection you're trying to make. Not that you have the coolest features on your screws or the benefits of screwing with your screws are so awesome. They want to make a human to human connection. And the story does that in the most compelling, unique way, as long, as Danny pointed out, it's truly authentic.
What is your take on poking fun at yourself? Let's just say people want people your customer to take you seriously as a business, but sometimes business can be too serious. What effects can you see on storytelling by being a bit deadpan and basically taking the mickey out yourself? Have you seen that really work well?
Yeah, so I think this comes back to this same concept of brand essence or brand identity. Right. I prefer brand essence. Right. Yeah. And so some people are more serious people. Right. And if that's who your brand is, then you're probably trying to attract other serious people. So don't feel don't try to force humor. Don't force yourself out of your own authentic person. Yeah. On the other hand, I am an absolute chucklehead. I love to be sarcastic. I love to make jokes. I love to have fun. And if anybody wants to do business with me and they don't like it when I crack jokes or when I see things that are funny or I make fun of myself or anyone else, right, in a non-hurtful way, then I shouldn't do business with them. I am not their kind of guy. And that's my companies, every single one are a reflection of me as an individual. And so we're always going to be humorous. We're never take ourselves seriously. I have no problem, with, taking a beat down. Often we create funny little rivalries inside the company where the finance department is beating on the marketing department for doing things. They're giving away prices that are too low, right? And then the marketing guys, we're going to get those finance guys, here's a buy one, get one free offer, right? And those internal silly rivalries, in some ways they are, that is manufactured on a certain level, right? Finance and marketing aren't actually at odds with each other. But I guarantee you, the accountants are like, hey, marketing, stop giving away the stuff at a low price. And marketing's like, hey, screw you guys. We need to put points on the board. So there's truth to it as well, if that makes sense.
Makes sense. So what about product solutions that deliver on, say, brand promise?
Right. So wherever you've started in this story, it's important that your product actually does solve the problem, right? Your brand stands for something. It says, I'm going to help you solve this problem. If it screws, I need to fasten this board to another board, or I need to fix these items together. That's the business we're in. We're screwing you. And that if you can't deliver on that promise, if your stuff actually fails or it's poor quality or any of those types of things, then you are not going to deliver on a brand promise, and you're just another pretender, a poser, as they used to say when I was growing up, and that's not going to be a sustainable business. So make sure your product does solve a problem and that you, in fact, do as a company live up to whatever promises you're making, and don't make promises you can't keep.
Yeah, makes sense. So a few more hellos. So Herb said, like helping you get a better night's sleep. I think he's referring back to the custom and the brand promise earlier on. Owen says, hi. Yelchin says, hey guys, nice to see you. Saibi mentions Donald Miller storyboard is also useful, going back to the storytelling earlier on. Henrietta said, good morning, gentlemen. Thanks for doing this again. Nick says, good to see you, Danny. Hope you're keeping well, bro. Thanks for all the content. You're putting out, stay safe, stay humble, as always. Thank you, Nick. And also thank you for the mask, for the donations, for the cross donation for the NHS. Elchin is coming and says, what if if I see example, I suppose, see potential in pet products and starting a pet brand, but I don't have an interest in the pet, just starting a business. How can I say authentic story or selling beauty products for women and I'm a man? Very good point. Do you want to take this one first?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I want to just reflect back that it's not your interest in pets. Maybe that's not why you got into it. Why did you get into it? Right? What in fact did stimulate you to do it? There was some kind of motivation, and it's probably both financial, but also kind of big picture, right? I wanted to be independent, or I was working a job I didn't like. And so I started this business to get independent. And the more I've learned, the more I've evolved. It's not the product. It's not the item you're selling. It's why you're doing this. This is part of that brand story. And all of that will be authentic because it's the truth, right? And it's more compelling than you think it is. I guarantee you, Danny, right now people are listening and they're like, well, my story is just not that interesting. Steve said that one about putting the kid in school, but mine's not that interesting. I just wanted to have extra pizza money or beer money or whatever. I guarantee you, if you think out the story, and again, we have a free SOP that will help pull out that company story from you. Everybody has a unique, compelling story that will resonate with someone, and that's someone's who you're looking for. And a quick note on whoever Herb, he says like helping you get a better night's sleep. That's fine. I think that's a nice concept. But it's like helping single moms get a better night's sleep, or helping, contractors get a better night's sleep. You really have to niche down because everybody wants a better night's sleep. So that's your audience is not the world. It's got to be some small sector that you could be important to, in my opinion.
Yeah. Just a little reflection on what Elgin said here. He's talking about, say, for pet products. Now, I know people that sell pet products but don't have pets, but they've got lots of empathy. And I think people with pets like dogs and cats and stuff, they're naturers. So they have empathy. So you can channel that in a slightly different way, because you can look at whatever way you're making it different. If it's supplements, and let's just say you've got a scientific background and you can work with chemists, etc. And there's an improvement there for ligaments in the back, like dog's back legs. You don't have to own the dog, but there is a mission there that where is suitable for you. So there's a byproduct to that. I know guys whose partners, they work together as a team and they sell women's products, and that's fine. As the woman in the relationship, obviously the woman is sourcing these products, but you're working on the other part of the mission where you can help. Yours might be the financing or executing on marketing, SEO, external traffic, and everything else. So there are means and ways to work around it, but it is always healthy to have an interest, even if it's come from a slightly different paradigm.
Totally right. And I want to double down on that a little bit. Whatever you're selling, there should be some intended benefit. You're not selling a product, you're selling the benefit of using that product, right? So in the ligaments improving in the dog, that means the dog feels better. That means the owner is happy. You're selling happiness. Yeah. And so the why of the company is, hey, I needed to, have some extra money and we were struggling, or, there's some struggle bus story typically that involves why you started the company. But then here's what we're accomplishing as a result of this struggle bus that we rode, if that makes sense.
Totally. Next step. This is what you've done with Aplomb over the years, apart from the time you were spending zillions on AdWords and you scaled a bit too far. But nail it and scale it. And you've done this over and over. Do you want to take this one up?
Well, first of all, you really never miss the opportunity to remind me of losing $500,000 in 90 days, based on my own arrogance, by the way. So yes,
no, I did. I like the fact that you could talk about it. You didn't do it once. You've done it twice, and
that's because I'm a slow learner.
That you can do it. Well, you do it twice, but you're still here to see the day. You learned from it, but no, it's a fantastic story. It's a story that you can be proud of, because what you've done is you pushed the needle. It's like, how far can I take this, and where is the ceiling? You found your ceiling, and that's fine. And it didn't take you out the game. You made a big, some people, what you spent on that AdWords in a month will never make in a lifetime. So, so at the end of the day, it's relative to your position, but you went on and grew a big company. If you remember, part of that story is that you were stuck at 3 to 5 million, and someone basically were laughing, saying, come back to us when you hit 25. And then you went back and done the 25, and part of that journey is to obviously to scale it and nail it. So that really is the right thing to think about. Is before you are so concerned about scaling, right? We hear this word scale, and don't do that because you can't scale it. Almost everything you do early on is not scalable, right? You don't have the time, you don't have the experience, you don't have the money to put together a scalable solution on day one. It's just not possible. Nobody does, by the way. I don't. Elon Musk doesn't. Nobody does. It's almost like the laws of economics, right? So you start with figuring out what works. And so before you try to pour in a big old bunch of money in marketing or operations, before you really dump massive resources, you have to really make sure your system is working. And in my view, the best equation you can use, we call it the basic sales equation, which is essentially defining your input metrics. Maybe they're shoppers, maybe they're visitors, maybe they're how many customers you have or the lifetime value. But there's some basic sales equation that says with these inputs, equals marketing dollars spent, time spent, whatever it is on the other side of the equation. Those are the secondary part of the equation. You should be able to start making things predictable. And ultimately, that looks like I'm generating this many leads. I'm turning those people into shoppers. I'm converting them into customers. And when I do that using these various sources, whether it's Amazon ads or Pinterest or any of the lot of them, you
figure out first what's working. You try to figure out the limits of the scale very slowly. You got to be very careful about that. And then as you do that, then you apply that working model. Let's say Pinterest is working. You try that on Facebook, or you try it on YouTube or Google or wherever else it makes sense. And again, I'm not ignoring Amazon. It's the same exact formula on Amazon. Figure out what works and then try to apply that to other engines. If you start on Amazon and move it to Google AdWords, fine, I don't care. All of that is data, and you then are taking that basic sales equation. Once you nail it, then you figure out, all right, now how do we really go from there? Don't try to scale it first and then nail it. That is the wrong answer.
Well, people do that, don't they? This is common in startups where they're very well capitalized. So they'll go and scale, trim the fat, but then you get churn, don't you? I call it permissions of scale. Like you do is you work out where is the point of scale. An example, much smaller scale to what you do, is like with our agency, we nearly went down the road of doing the full service agency outside of PPC. When I've done the numbers on it and the human capital and compared it, it's nuts. It's absolutely nuts. And I had to pull back. And I realized what was happening is while Ellis was coding and we're getting ready, I had idle hands. So I was trying to fill a gap. And then I realized it's like, never do this. It's just not in the permissions of scale versus what we do as an agency, and the human overhead, and it's just not worth it. And I've seen it time and time again with startups, well capitalized, and then what they do is that when they don't hit their numbers, and then they trim the fat, they're trimming staff, they get churn rates, and so I agree with you. Spend a bit more time thinking about where is your permissions of scale, then nail it.
Yeah, it's all of it has to do with numbers, right? You talked about it, you did the math. And too often entrepreneurs who have such amazing gut instincts, we're not doing enough math. We have ideas all day long, and 90% of those ideas should be put on the bookshelf and never touched again, particularly if we applied math to them, right? Because we're too lazy to do the math most of the time. But until you have the idea, until you can back it up with data, you really shouldn't lean too heavily into these sorts of things. Because ultimately, data is the only thing that is a good predictor of success, not just instinct. Although we can get us on the fast track with the instinct, we've got to match it up with data and true results. And all of that is mathematics. Simple math, by the way. A basic sales equation is 4 to 6 variables, and it's super easy to calculate on a daily basis. There's nothing to it. We're not talking about algebra here. We're just talking about this times that. And is the trend going the positive financial direction? That's it. It's super easy.
Yeah. Time or money, but never both. I'm intrigued by this one.
Yeah. So when you build a brand, people, they're impatient. Entrepreneurs are generally impatient. And so if you don't have the capital, then patience is a virtue, right? And so you cannot go quick, especially if you lack capital. And when you go quick, then you are not going to be able to have the patience that it takes to execute well. So my whole point here is focus on what you can focus on. If you have the capital, you still need to be focused on making that capital deploy properly and have a good ROI. It's okay to have some slop in the gears, right? Amazon said, we're going to go as fast as we can, and we'll backfill the operational excellence. And there's obviously that for them model that worked very well. A lot of us can grow through that. That's when you have capital. If you don't have capital, which this is why it's time or money. Usually you have time, which means you have to be patient, or you have money, which means you don't have the time. And so it's very rare to see those both weigh in together. And I really want people to think about what they have, and then just realize you can't control it all. Nobody can control it all. So either be patient because you don't have the money, or if you have the money, then you've got to be very careful about how you proceed, because people have the tendency to waste that money because they think that money is a shield against failure, and it is not.
No, the impact goes back to the patience and being impatient. You got the money, you spend it because you're impatient. You want to get there, and you can't let your ego get in the way. Which takes us to the next point: is measure and manage. What's the famous Peter Drucker quote?
Something like "What gets measured gets managed," or That's what? Yeah, what gets measured gets managed. Yeah. And by the way, that is not just famous, but literally this morning, I've already quoted that quote to one of my teammates, because if we can't measure it, I don't want to have philosophical discussions. I don't want to have discussions that are subjective. I want to have true objective discussions that are like, here's the metric we all agreed on. We're not hitting it. By the way, not hitting it could mean we're exceeding it wildly and having great success, but we need to know why, right? If you're missing it in a negative way, you want to know why. If you're missing it in a positive way, you want to know why. And then you adjust, right? You've got all these controls, these dials on your business. And so it's really, really important to measure stuff. That means you got to have SOPs that help you deliver predictability. That means you need to have financial systems and reporting so that you can actually see the scorecard. And this is a giant mistake. I think a lot of people are looking at scorecards that they have, but they're not accurate. And so that's problem one. And problem two, they're incomplete. So looking at your sales on Amazon is, 20% of the picture. If you don't know your landed cost, if you don't know your true financial burdens all the way up and down the business in a true cash flow and profit loss category, you're playing with, one arm tied behind your back. It's just not going to work. So you got to get that.
So over the years, multiple business, you've got the experience to build the scorecard. You understand how to set up your spreadsheet and measure what needs to get measured. What happens when you've not kind of got that experience and you haven't got that to that stage where you can afford to bring in a CFO? What would you do there?
Well, to be honest with you, Amazon sellers have it way easier than I have ever had it or will ever have it, because they can pay a few $100 a month to these agencies who can pretty much automate their financial systems, right? They bring in all the relevant sales data. You have to provide inputs in terms of the expense and costing and product side of the data, but they'll give you financial statements once a month, and they're dead simple. It's, it depends on the size of the business, but from $300 to $600 a month, that is stupidly low. And I see so many people, they're like, well, I don't want to spend $40 a month or $50 a month, or let alone $300 a month. And I'm telling you, you are absolutely, you're missing the boat. You have to know your numbers. And that is the cheapest result that you could possibly get, honestly.
Would you also say that you can not over measure, but you take in too many metrics, but then don't optimize for any because you become burdened by overwhelm? Is there 3 metrics across all of your business you stand by? Obviously, you want to know profit, but are there 3 that kind of stand out that might throw people off? I mean, I have 2 main metrics. I want to know the percentage of cash on hand and how much we spend on monthly on the percentage. And my guys can build these beautiful spreadsheets, but they're the 2 metrics I'll zone in at first and then go back out again. I want to know how much cash we got on hand on each of the business, and I need to know there's at least 6 to 8 months, and I never like to go over 66% in terms of our current turnover. That's just 2 little golden rules before I really get into the data. But what about yourself?
Well, we're fundamentalists in many ways on this. We want to track revenue and its trend. Yeah. We want to track gross margin and its trend. And there's a subset of gross margin that we often refer to as gross contribution.
Yes.
This means a little extra weighting goes into that gross margin. So on an accounting, I'll call it a nerd accountant GAAP basis. And I'm sure they have their reasons to help us to file taxes, but I hate GAAP stuff. There are certain rules that says, well, cost of goods and maybe some freight, but not this other freight. So gross profit in its pure sense is not always a good indicator. However, gross contribution, once you kind of weight in the things that you think as a business are important and variable and relevant to that product or sale experience, that is then instructive. And you look at that contribution and you're like, all right, now compare that to whatever fixed overhead that I have. And we look at mostly the trends of those key indicators. Are we going up? Are we going down? Right? If your gross margin drops by 3 or 4%, you really want to know why. Yeah. And in the world of tariffs and duties and surprises, these things really do have variability to them. So understanding that is truly essential. And there are plenty of other things. I completely agree with you. Your mission is not to come up with 40 data points to think you're like NASA launching missiles. You just need those key indicators. There's both, some of those are lagging indicators. How are my decisions worked? And then you need to develop some forward indicators as much.
Do you know why I like those two metrics? Because they don't lie. They're either 66% below or above. That's a fact. That's what you spent that month or not. And then the other one is you either have that cash on hand or you don't. So that's why I like them as like static metrics. I go deeper into that, but like if I'm rushing around doing 101 things, there's a launch going on and I want to have a quick look, they're two metrics that I like to have a quick look at and go, all right, we're on course here. And then I can go back out and then I'll take a deeper look at stuff. But yeah.
It's totally right. By the way, one of the best things you can do on a product basis, product by product, is something called a turn and earn ratio. And for different products, there are different turn and earn ratios that are satisfactory. But if you are below your milestone, what you've determined is acceptable for that product, and it happens on a trending basis, kill that product, because the other products that are at or above your milestone, if you put the money in inventory into those, so a turn and earn ratio, you guys can look that up. It's not hard to calculate. That is the most compelling way to manage your product assortment. You put money where it actually turns and earns for you. It's that simple.
Yeah. Develop people. Now, this is, we're a couple of steps in from the end now, but that can go anywhere really, can't we? It's going back to, you can't force it. Generally, you develop people when you've got some money because then you've got people around you. If you're a one-man band, you're just developing yourself, right? So talk to me about the development stage for you and what that means.
Well, first of all, there's multi-layers to this, as you described. When you're first starting out, maybe you just need a graphics person that you can just have on an on-call gig basis. Yeah. Fine. But you can certainly develop that relationship and you can continue to use them and you give them prompts and you'll start to develop your own language back and forth and go, hey, remember that thing we did with the, graphic or the logo or the whatever? I need that variation on this product. You'll develop your own language. My point is, instead of treating people like tissue paper that are commodities to be gone through, blow your nose and move on to the next one, think about how you can use this resource and develop this resource to go back again and again and again. They say your network is your net worth, and I cannot tell you how true that is. This past couple of weeks, some of my partners that I've formed up deals with that I've known for 20 to 30 years, we're gonna make a company, and that company is gonna do $50 million in the next 9 to 12 months. Not because I have any particular skill, only because I have these relationships and I can put a puzzle together. And all of these relationships started with very much hands-off, not full-time employee kind of stuff. Just like, how can I help you? And if you take that approach early on, and then you evolve as the company evolves to, can I put this person on a career path? Maybe they start in this department and they want to grow or they want to manage people. Can I get them to help me manage other people? All of those things, human capital is, I think, most misunderstood and least valued by entrepreneurs.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it depends, because sometimes if an entrepreneur is like very egotistical, they think it's all them and they're doing a favor to their team, which is untrue. Paul, just before we move on to the last part, Paul says, what kind of delays are you seeing out of China? 90 days or 120 from door to door? I'm finding most factories are very slow to respond.
Well, it's a fair question. So I can say on most products, we're not finding delays. So on most general consumer products, we are not finding that many delays at this stage. On PPE products or products that are in extraordinary demand, there are problems often with the factory, but rarely is the factory the biggest problem. Air freight is a giant cluster right now. It is completely broken. If you are trying to ship your stuff by air freight, prepare to pay more than you've ever paid, have it delivered slower than you've ever got it, and disappoint everyone up and down the supply chain, because air is completely busted right now.
Yeah. And if we had a little bit of context there, is maybe the position you are in with your factories compared to Paul there. We don't know where he is in his business, right? Like, for instance, you don't put 30% down as deposit on your products. You're paying after you've shipped, right? Well,
in full disclosure, that's true for our normal consumer products ongoing basis.
Yeah.
But so PPE is something that the world needs suddenly.
Yeah.
And I won't bore you with the long story, but our company story is I needed masks. I found masks. I bought a dental supply company. Then other people said, I want masks. And I'm like, all right, well, let me see if I can find them. And pretty soon, so we have now a company completely dedicated and lots of people working on getting this PPE that is proper CE and FDA and all that, proper stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. Point to point. And the truth is I have to pay those people in advance just to get a production slot. Right. And that's just the nature of the beast. So I want to be clear. Yes, on regular consumer products, we get terms. Not only do we get terms, we've extended those terms and have leaned into the sharing the pain in the world right now. So I think most products are being produced in China on a reasonable basis. And if you're getting a lot of delays, you need to look for other options because somebody's got capacity right now. A lot of people have capacity.
Yeah, it depends on what products you're looking for. Final step, exit strategy.
Yeah, so because early on, if not in the beginning, you've decided that you want to exit this company. Now, you don't have. I'm not demanding you exit the company, but I want you to build it as if you were going to sell it, because that is what creates a business built on systems. That's what creates a business with the best equity, right? And so my advice is that if you early on decided that you want to exit, you should have some sort of general timing, right? I want to sell it in 3 years or 5 years or 10 years, and I want to sell it for this much money. Now, if you are going to be shooting the moonshot and go, I want to sell this in a year for $1 billion, I'm not sure that that's helpful to you. I would say set a feasible something that, like, if this happened, it would impact my life in a meaningful, positive way. But you're not done when you sell the thing, right? There's other things you can do. There's other things you'll want to do, I assure you, having been there. So once you kind of think about that exit, you start putting that strategy into place a year, maybe even 2 years before you actually want to exit the building. Because the consultants and brokers and bankers and so forth that are involved in that process, they're going to do some sanity checks and go, what about this? What about that? What about that? And you're going to find that you, as great as you think you are and as tight as you think you've done, and I followed all Steve's advice, and I can't believe I'm doing anything that needs to be tightened up. Everybody's got to tighten up. I have to tighten up. We all have those little dials that have to get dialed in. And we have developed very significant relationships with people who help kind of coach you through the process and then put you on the market ultimately. And it's a stressful process. You will hate it. You will, during the process, even as you're close to a deal, you'll rue the day you ever thought about selling it. There's so many emotions you'll go through during the process. And even once it's sold, there's still, some kind of back end, worries that you have, but you have to make guarantees.
If you're on an earn out and stuff like that, and you're a consultant still in the business, and yeah.
Even if you're not, the world is very litigious. So structuring it right, telling the truth, doing everything right from the beginning. One of the things that we say as part of our DNA is I put my name on it, right? Our company DNA is I put my name on it. And so should you if you're in marketing and you do a job. And by that, we basically say just do the right thing at all times and give us the worst news as fast as you can. And let's just be honest. Let's just tell the truth as often as we can. So when you do that and you put all those wheels in motion early on, then you're prepared to exit in a more orderly fashion. You will still hate it. You will still cuss yourself out, and probably me, hopefully more Danny than me, in the future when you're going through the process, even as you're on the cusp of a big payday. Yeah. It's painful. It's a nightmare, but it's life. That's what we do.
Yeah, indeed. Some messages here. Paul did ask as well, Steve, how much will you lose in ad spend currently? I think he's referring to if you launch a product, how much were you willing to go into the red and eat it as a product cost at launch?
So it varies by product, but for the first 2 to 4 weeks, we have no problem spending 100% of the revenue. So, yeah. But by 3 months in, we are not spending more than 20% typically, and we understand all the organic benefits, but we have a very broad-based, big picture. Like, we are here to put money in the top and get profit out of the bottom. Yeah. And And so, yes, there's some intangibles, and yes, there's lots of things, but we're very focused on direct ROI that is measurable and manageable.
Yeah. Henrietta says, I don't think China has delays anymore. I think a lot of that 95 capacity now. I think when I was speaking to Kian, Selva says there is delay in the complete process. So China is also part of it. There is a delay in the complete process, so China is part of it.
I think that's the air. Maybe Selva's talking about the air. Global air freight is completely broken. It doesn't matter if you're a parcel carrier like DHL or FedEx or a cargo carrier. The lack of 95% of commercial flights is killing us. And there are lots of, containers are not solving the problem. There's just lots of problems. And it ain't getting better. It's getting worse day by day. And that means the price is higher and the predictability of when you're going to get the shipments is lower.
Yeah. Paul says, Danny, do you follow Gary Vee? Absolutely. I love his no-nonsense approach to everything. Steve, do you like Gary Vee?
I like some of his newer stuff. So I think, for just having the style of just dropping F-bombs to get attention is not my thing.
No, that's fair enough. I do swear. I need to get that under control. But yeah,
I don't actually mind the swearing. I just think it's a cheap stunt to get attention.
I
think Tony Robbins does the same thing. If I could just start dropping F-bombs all day, I'll get somebody's attention. But gotcha. I say, he doesn't need to do that. He's brilliant. The other thing I'm not a fan of is what I call struggle porn. Like, we don't have to say, like, grind. And in the last 6 to 9 months, I've seen Gary go, hey, wait, just to be clear, I want you to work hard. I want you to grind. I want you to put in the energy. But that's not how life is long term. You can't do that forever. And so he really has broadened his kind of perspective.
He's addressed that. Because I think, who's it? Grant Cardone kind of goes after him. Like, he gives him sly digs, saying about baseball cards and talking about having a side.
Grant Cardone, I know the name. I don't know his style or what he does very much, but I can say that I think Gary is brilliant. I think like 90% of his ideas, I do like the no nonsense. When somebody goes, well, I feel this way or that way, it's like, I don't care. Nobody cares. Stop your feelings and get the facts. Yeah. I'm a fan. It's like, that's right. I also don't care about, your excuses. I talk to people and they're like, I was going to launch a brand in 2014, but then my cat got sick. And then on the way to the vet, I got a flat tire. And then the tow truck driver was hitting on me. And it's like, I don't care about any of that story. That is not a good company story because you never launched. Yeah. If you did all of that, overcame the obstacles and launched, now I'm a fan, right? Yeah. It is that simple of a paradigm. Overcome, persist, and make it happen.
Yeah. Makes sense. Is there anything you would like to add before we go?
No, I will be having a 1 hour swearing, dropping the F-bomb consistently no, I'm just kidding. I thank everybody for joining us. I hope this was instructive. Again, if you go to theawesomers.com/184, we'll try to put the show up there at some point. And if there is a mailing list that we mail you free SOPs, how to find your personal why, something about org chart, doing your company story. All of this stuff is free and it just shares our opinions. If you don't like it, don't use it. Well, we're open to being wrong. It's just we're not. I'm getting tired of being right all the time, Danny.
Yeah, indeed. So we'll get you back next week. We haven't come up with a subject yet. It's been 2 great weeks in a row. Maybe we'll put a bit of a team together, but ultimately I'll do the announcements Monday or Tuesday, what we'll cover for next week. But thank you again for joining me on this dual cast. This will go out on set of sessions on the podcast tomorrow. So we'll bid farewell to everyone. I'll be back here at 4 p.m. tomorrow. Much love. Take care. Stay home. Hope you're all well. See you soon.